Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Batwoman Book Club. We are here this week to finish the back half of the J.H. Williams and Wim Blackman run on Batwoman in New 52. Freya, what are the two books we are reading today?
We are reading World's Finest, which is this one over here. And then we're going to be reading Blood is Thick. This Blood is Thick, which is this one over here.
All right. So let's jump in with World's Finest. World's Finest, of course, as you pointed out at the end of last week, it's a word that usually involves a Batman and Superman team up, but
right.
Here it's being co-opted for, or at least a Bat person and a Super person team up, and here it's been co-opted for Batwoman and Wonder Woman.
Because at the end of the second trade, we find out that Medusa, or there's a Greek mythology that's involved in the case that Batwoman is on, and then she goes to seek out help from Wonder Woman to kind of solve some of the mysteries around it.
And the first issue here is, I think it's some of the most fun that any of these Batwoman issues have been. We have J.H. Williams back on art. We have Batwoman kind of admitting that she's in over her head in terms of this mythology stuff. And then you have the DEO taking over this cruise ship that Medusa had been on. And it's kind of like funny. It's the first time that this book has been like a little bit charming. It's been so dire. And I think Rucka was much better at putting a grin on Batwoman's face sometimes than this series has been so far. And it's the first time I've just felt that little twist of fun back. And then also, but there's also this weight of failure on Kate, not only because she couldn't deal with the mythology stuff, but because she knows she also failed Maggie Sawyer because the case is going horribly and Maggie Sawyer thinks she's going to be like fired or something.
Right, and I think it's like, but at the same time, there was a lot of gothic element to it. I felt like, it has a little bit of horror horror element about it, especially with the way the lore is exposed of the proud Bloody Mary, like the lore of that is explored, and then also how Batwoman actually goes and shoots her, but her face started talking. I think
that was such an awesome moment.
Yeah, it was like a very scary, scary kind of things that's happening over there. And at the same time, you were intertwined with, that right there.
Yeah, and she picks up her face, her shattered face, and it's
shattered face, the face is talking. And then you have the intertwined with Wonder Woman fighting some demon somewhere, and then you kind of see a little bit of Wonder Woman's inside her mind a little bit. Then you also come back to seeing some of the riots that's happening because GCPD has failed to get those kids back, and because most of those kids were of Latina heritage, people are calling them racist. And then there's also a Ku Klux KKK, a person wearing a KKK hood.
What is happening? Is that somebody in the KKK protesting? But then I realized that it's like a KKK hood and it says Gotham City Police Department. I was wow, exactly. Go in, protesters.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of things going on, and at the same time, they're hanging out on a boat. On a cruise ship. But so there's a lot going on.
And it made me, I don't know, I think it made me really realize, and I was mentioning last episode, I just wasn't feeling like Batwoman to me anymore. And for this brief moment it did, but boy does that change as the story goes on. And I'll point out one thing on this very beautiful spread of Wonder Woman, and I'll say Wonder Woman is very much one of my favorite comic characters. I've been reading her since before I could read. This made me so happy to see because I do not like the Wonder Woman run from New 52. Some people love it, and it grates. It's like a cheese grater against my face. I hate it. So flames on the side of my face. I hate it so much. But so this made me really love this for depicting this awesome, strong, bold Wonder Woman. But I think it has a little tickler of what's going to be wrong with this arc in that there's no word balloons. It's all narration, and it's tucked into her hair, and it's tucked into the sky, and it's on the sand. I think this arc, J.H. Williams is out of control, and we get a lot of really beautiful pages, but it's it's just turned into a storybook. Nobody talks to each other, and it's all just narration. So that we're going to get into that because it doesn't really happen as much in this issue.
Right.
But I'm just now having read it, I'm like, oh, signs of what's to come in the rest of this arc, which is not my favorite arc of Batwoman.
Right. And the thing is, like, I texted you, I'm like, this is not going well. This is not going well for me. Because the thing is, like, so here's the thing. Like, I mean, I don't know, if you want to still talk about the first issue of the trade
We don't have to.
anymore?
I mean, I think we talked about it. Unless you have more things in it you want to talk
Okay.
about.
So then we go to the next issue, which is an interlude.
Oh no!
There's like
I
three of them.
love this first one, the Zero issue interlude.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So good.
Yeah. So you're supposed to love that, right? Because it's like all about Kate Kane leaving a message for her dad. She still doesn't talk to her dad, and then she says that, oh, before I go to every mission, I leave you a message, and this time I'm leaving you a message. And then it kind of takes you back to their old time, talks about both of them. There's a sweet, charming time where during her sister's funeral, she's sitting in the closet, literal closet, and then because her problem was that Beth was the one who usually picks the dress for her, and now she doesn't know what to do. And then her father just,
it's so sweet. As a dad of a daughter, it really got me.
Exactly. Like, it's like you don't see daughter-father, like father-daughter moments like that. And the most atrocious, like, firing, like I told you, like, no one should be working in the comic industry because of this. It's effing red background with black
I've got to forget to be crazy about comic lettering the way that I am, folks. It took 3 weeks and we're there.
No, oh my God! What the F?
Ooh,
like,
who wants to read black text on a red background? The only thing worse is red text on a black background. That's the only thing worse.
I mean, I was furious. I was like, "Stop talking, Batwoman! Stop talking!" If you're talking about black on
that's
red,
the worst. Red text on black is the worst because it vibrates.
And the thing is, like, it's the whole issue is filled with that. That's the whole issue is about. And the thing is, a lot of serious things going on. And eventually you see that all the training that her father sends her out to, in the end, she had to like face like the ultimate test where it was like she was sent to this, solving this case where a family was murdered. She appears there and the family was already killed. And only to turn out it was actually all fake. Her father was trying to test to see whether she will actually kill someone. Goes back to what we talked about last week's episode, that, Batwoman and killing. All of this is going on. I'm like, I don't care. Please stop talking because I can't look at this anymore. And the whole issue is black and white, which is, it's kind of like black and white with red being the only color. And then on top of it, there's this, I still love it though.
Yeah. I mean, what's great is that I'll talk about it positively and then I'll get into the negative. It retreads moments from the Rucka run without ever feeling like it's just recapping the Rucka run. Mm-hmm. We saw this Batman offering his hand to Kate Kane in the Rucka run and giving her his color palette from a different perspective, but getting her monologue over it fills in so much. And I had points in this where I really love Grayson, the series from later in New 52, where Nightwing kind of becomes a secret agent, and it's written by Tom King. As Batwoman kind of goes off on her gap year here to like be an anti-terrorist person around the globe, I'm like, I want to read this series. Can we have sent Batwoman to Grayson? Like, can I read this series where she's just globe-trotting awesome anti-terrorist Batwoman? Because this seems like it's a lot more fun than the thing that I'm reading right now.
Right. And the thing is, they also talk about a lot of the things that she has gone through or she has seen. Like, she was actually like, she was tortured or things like, she had to learn all of these different things. And, she had to, like, she said that she climbs with broken ribs and then she had to run with like broken femur. Like, she was like doing all this stuff. Like, I want to see that, but can we please, for the love of everything good and, nice, have white background with black letter.
But it's not just that one issue, because as we go on to this beautiful spread of Wonder Woman and Batwoman in a submarine, like, it's so gorgeous. We have yellow on green. Green is made out of yellow. And when it came out in trade, I think I only got halfway through this, honestly. I got to that around this point and I stopped reading and I kind of just skimmed. I was and this is the risk of having, J.H. Williams and Blackman writing for J.H. Williams, is that like, I think that they've gone so deep into the story that it's not fun to read anymore. It's not just the lettering. Like, they're basically just narrating back and forth at each other. And it's, even though it's like such a cool story. Like, if I just pitched you, we're going to go into the Greek prison and we're gonna go through a maze, and we're gonna try to find Medusa at the end of the maze, but she's not gonna be there. Like, if you just describe this to me, I'd be like, yes, yes, yes. It's because it sounds like the coolest comic book ever, and it's beautiful to just look at and not have to read. But in execution of the full art team, it's horrific, and I like barely can look at the pages.
And it's like every single page, it's so high concept, and it's so, but I was like, please, can we have the the box, 9 boxes, or like 6 boxes, or however, can I please have boxes back? I need boxes back. Like, I needed that back, because every single one of them is it's like a funny thing, it's like a crazy things that going on, and you are like, oh my god, what's happening? Like, it just, it's not good. It's
Yeah,
not
and
good.
I do want to talk for a minute in a positive, because I don't think it's fun if we just like scream about the issue. And I
No,
think there's
no,
some
no, no,
positive
no.
things. I think that Williams is doing one interesting thing here, which is making us feel the claustrophobia that the characters are feeling. First, they're in the maze, and then later they're kind of trapped by this mythical blackness. And it
Right.
definitely feels tight. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Descent, which is the scariest movie I've ever seen in my life, and I saw it in
Yeah.
movie theaters. But it's these women that are spelunking, and they're being chased by these creatures, and it feels just like this page, like where
Right.
their Batwoman is compressed into this little space over there, and the whole rest of the page is black. So I think from a graphic design standpoint, again, do you want to do pleasing graphic design, or do you want to write legible art? And I think that the graphic design is pleasing, it's beautiful, but I don't know that I believe that it's legible.
I think like a lot of the time they also try to get you a feeling like a little bit psychedelic as well. Like,
Yeah.
they try to induce that feeling. But the thing is, I don't know whether I needed that feeling every single page until the arc was completed. And that to me is like overdoing it. And it just takes away, because by the time we get to the very final battle, when there was like a final splash page, when like everyone kind of goes against Medusa, you don't have that magical moment anymore, because you have seen so much of it. So by the time you get to that, you're like, oh, well, thank God it's over.
Yeah, I felt that. Now, I will say I had a magical moment that was not that final battle, and it was actually probably my least favorite issue of this book. But it's here. So Wonder Woman and Batwoman track down Pegasus, who in this instance
Right.
is a human being who's been disfigured by the Medusa folks. And here's why this was so thrilling to me. It's Batwoman in full daylight. And I think it's the first time we've seen that so far in a
Right.
Batwoman book. And it's beautiful. It brings out a different quality of her hair, and it allows for different lighting on her costume, but it also has her feeling weirdly out of place, like she's a creature of the night with this pale skin. She looks more out of place in daylight, I think, than Batwoman looks. And I really actually, it's a dull issue because it's just so much exposition, and I think it's telling us instead of showing us. But we do get this really interesting moment that contrasts Batwoman and Wonder Woman in a way that I think is very useful and productive, which is that Wonder Woman is a warrior. What's going on? And her title at this point is that she's effectively becoming the goddess of war because she finds out her true lineage. And Wonder Woman as a goddess of war has to be okay with death. She has to be okay with death in battle, and also in putting somebody out of their misery who has done valorous things. But Wonder Woman is also built on empathy, and it doesn't mean she has to like it. She'll shed a tear. On the other side, we have Batwoman, who plays at having this claim, like Batman does, that there's not going to be any death. But I don't know if she believes it. And I don't think she has as much of an emotional problem with killing as she has an ideological problem. And so you have Wonder Woman, beheading Pegasus to put him out of his misery because he's never going to heal all of these wounds. Wonder Woman goes through with it, even though Batwoman tries to stop her, but it's Wonder Woman who cries. And it's Batwoman who's like, well, we've got a soldier on. And they're both soldiers, canonically and in practice. But it just draws such an interesting contrast between these two women. And it makes me wish that we were reading a better story with them, because I think there is a lot to do with them. I think they make a world's finest team up. And that was the only point that I really feel like we got to the heart of what made them so interesting together.
Yeah, and I also on the like everything. I agree with all the things that you said, but at the same time, like I kind of liked all the torture that they showed that Pegasus have gone through, and then how irrecoverable he is, and then also like Diana points out that the gods, like they're pretty much immortals, but they heal by belief, and that was the soul. The reason I was kind of like I'm like that because that was also the premise for American Gods by
Mhm.
Neil Gaiman, that the people are forgetting the old gods and the gods are dying, and that's why they kind of decides to have a fight. And so to me that mythical part of it, that coming back, so I thought that it was very interesting because of that. And also like as you pointed out, the Batwoman in the morning, but all I could think about, I'm like, oh my god, how much she's sweating inside that. Like
Right,
I
in
couldn't,
full daylight.
in a full daylight. But I think like she also said like, "Oh, I'm kind of I would kill for your uniform." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You need to take a shower after that."
Yeah. So I mean, there's good elements. I don't think that this ever becomes a bad comic book.
No,
I
no,
feel like
no.
I have this inner barometer for when I'm reading a comic book, for when it just like stops hanging together well and the story is like too boring. And I don't know if that one ever gets there, but it just gets to a point of such averageness that none of the other parts of this run have for me here. And there's moments that stick out, right? That the showing of the torture of Pegasus, the contrast between Batwoman and Wonder Woman, um, Killer Croc going further in his Pokemon evolution to
Right.
now being the mythical Hydra and destroying all of Gotham, but it just doesn't feel like it's popping the way that it should. And to your point about like by the time we get to the end and it gets really fun, it feels anticlimactic. Like we get to this last issue where we get to the big blowout, post Medusa, even with this mother of all monsters, and it just kind of almost feels like a footnote. Like it feels like, did we have to spend so much time going around the globe with Wonder Woman? Couldn't we have spent 3 or 4 issues on this very interesting fight in Gotham? It seems like that was the interesting part of the story.
And the thing is, like Batwoman herself says that, like, oh, all this time they were in Gotham. Like,
Yeah, like no,
that's
wow, surprise.
yeah, that she feels like, oh, I feel like an amateur. But the thing is like, yeah, like there's like a lot more going, a lot more like in the end, like Flamebird, she comes back, but then now she goes by Hawk something.
Hawk
Like she
Flame.
goes
I'm
with
like, isn't she
Hawk,
gonna get
Hawk
sued by
Flame.
Hawk Girl? How does
I,
trademark
I
work
don't
in the
know.
DC universe?
Right, exactly. So the thing is, like, she comes back and then she gets her revenge, and then we see the claw kind of going into the sea and getting a hold of a crab, which is I'm like, okay, now that's gonna be a thing. Then there's like so you have all this kind of fights that happens, and then Abbott, one of the allies of Batwoman from the Elegy run, he is killed. So all of this happens, and then but it just feels anticlimactic a lot of the ways. But I don't know whether I'm kind of looking for it because of the art of it all, because I'm like it was just every single page were such like so grand and so much. By the time you get to the end, you're like, I don't care.
Yeah, like I think when we were reading Rucka, a page like this we would have been talking about for like 10 minutes, which is this
Right,
is, her having her rematch against Hook. And
right.
here it's like we barely even want to comment about it. And I think it just goes to show like you can have the most beautiful artist on a book, but again, this theme will keep coming back as we're reading this Batwoman arc. It's not just about the art. Like he is drawing some of his best pages that he's ever drawn, and yet we're less interested here. So I don't know. I feel like we're really beating up on it, but because it's tough, man. This is a tough volume to get through, and I just
Right.
feel like it's
There's another
that's
one.
another
There's
really good
another one.
example.
There's like this is happening at the end. This is happening at the end, and you look at it, all of it, and especially, come on, what is this? I'm sorry. What are you trying to show in this? What's happening in here? It's no. I'm like, yeah, and there's
Yeah.
a lot of important things going on, but
But
sorry, I
the
think
the
enough of
outcome,
this.
there is a shocking outcome here. So ultimately, I mean, we haven't really talked about the story as a whole, but what happens is
Right,
that Batwoman and Wonder Woman are tracing the roots of the literal Medusa around the world, and the Medusa has now gone back to Gotham for whatever. Who knows what her whole deal was with needing to bring back all of these mythical creatures? But then we start to find out it's because she's trying to reawaken her mother, who's the mother of all monsters, and she wants to kind of bring her back by creating all of these mythical these mythical enemies that will then reawaken more mythical beasts from the sea, and eventually will kind of like create enough groundswell that she can recreate the Mother of Monsters. But then we ultimately, what we see is that the Mother of Monsters, she's much like many mythological concepts of this nature, she's not inherently bad. She's bad because Medusa wants to use her for evil. But once Medusa is, turned to stone with her own reflection, the Mother of Monsters asks Wonder Woman to just take her away. And I think that it's an interesting issue of like, it's the gun's not evil, the person is evil. Like the mythical monster is not evil, it's the people with their plot that is evil. And Batwoman kind of has a moment of like, huh. And again, it contrasts Batwoman with Wonder Woman as two warriors. That Batwoman is like, well, we got to the end of the story. We've got to bring this person to justice now. This is who we were chasing. And Wonder Woman's like, but she's not actually evil. I'm not going to kill somebody who's not actually evil.
Isn't that the other way around? Because it was a Wonder Woman who wanted to kill her.
Is it Wonder Woman who wants to kill her?
I think so, because Wonder Woman is like, she's always going to turn bad. And then it was Batwoman. No, if you change it. Look at this.
That's true.
This one
That's
over
true.
Here. This is how her story always ends. And then Batwoman says, if you change it. And then, and then they kind of like, she said that, okay, take my hand. And then they go off to do something.
You're right. I did have it backwards. And I think that I still think my point, though, I think still stands, which is like, it's an interesting contrast of the two of them as warriors.
Right.
Yeah. But then, so that's not the... Oh, please go on.
No, but the thing is like, I don't understand what was the point of kidnapping all those children. I didn't understand that.
It's like a monster pyramid scheme.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, I'm like, that was the whole point of this arc. You didn't bring that home. You just said like, oh, these kids were kidnapped. Okay, for what? What's going to happen? What would have been actually very good is like if one of the kid was actually, they showed that they couldn't save one of the kid. For, it would have actually made much more sense that, okay, you couldn't save one.
So I agree. And ultimately, this arc feels like it only existed to drive us to these two moments, one of which, well, they're both a little controversial. So one is that Batwoman crashes into Maggie Sawyer and she says, "Marry me, Mags." Mags is, as at the end of this, she's kind of feeling like, well, this thing all got solved. I guess all these kids are back. And so Batwoman proposes to her. What did you think about that moment?
Not good. These people should not get married. I'm sorry, but they shouldn't get married. Like, I mean, I'm not going to tell them. I'm like, oh my God, it's because there's such LGBTQ. But I'm sorry, but the thing is like, just very much the same way that we see it. This is like one of the superhero tropes where the female superhero just busts into the female love interest life because during a mission he realized how much he loves her. The same exact thing happens here too. And I'm sorry, they don't know each other long enough to do that.
Because and it just doesn't ring true to me at all. Like, they just had this moment at the end of the last arc where they finally, like, tell each other about their pasts and they're feeling comfortable with each other. And, like, the next step is marry me. It just rings so false. And reading it made me just be like, ugh. But again, I always have two minds when it comes to Batwoman. Part of me is like, well, you know what? A male hero does get to have this moment and ultimately very rarely actually marries the woman. But it's about, the comics are about like an amplification of life. So it's not enough to just hug somebody and say, I love you so much, right? Like in movies, usually it's like two people saying, I love you is the big deal. But comic books, everything's got to be heightened. So it's got to be a proposal. Like, and part of me is like, good for Batwoman for having that proposal moment. Like, that's cool. But then me, who's just reacting to the story, is like, it's not a good story beat. The characters didn't earn it. It doesn't help us get anywhere. I don't know. So I'm of two minds. I don't think it was a good choice, but I'm excited to see Batwoman get the trope.
But the thing is, like, to be honest though, why are we celebrating bad trope? If that's a bad for another group of characters, why are we bringing that bad trope to to a character who is supposed to be different? If you know what I mean. So why? Like, I would rather have like a whole run, a whole trade that's just them trying to get to that point. Like, them trying to or maybe, this was an accident. There was an emotional moment. And then they figuring out like, no, we should get married together. And the thing is, like, it's something that we also talked about before. It's that, okay, what's the end game? Because we know that marriage is not going to last. We know it because she's a cop, she's a superhero. They're going to have a clash. And then now you're going to take away a representation. Like, they're going to be a they're pretty much going to be the only lesbian couple in DC universe. And now you're going to take that away. So you give and you take. That whole marry me thing feels like a pandering. Like, it felt pandering.
Yeah. I always have two minds. I agree with everything you just said. And I think that it goes to what we talked about in the Rucka episode, which is that Rucka was so good because he gave and he took away. He gave little moments of love and happiness, and then he took them away, but the characters had agency all throughout that. And I think the difference here is that it feels like Williams and Blackman are trying to give us something that we didn't even ask for, but nothing really got taken away. And also, it doesn't really feel like it just feels like we're on a roller coaster track where we're being like drawn and we're going up the hill, but it doesn't feel like the characters are like making that motion. It feels like the track is making that motion. And that's part of what like disappointed me so much is it didn't really feel like we got there because the characters needed to get there.
And the thing is though, it's that what's going to be the end game? Like that's my ultimate what I'm going for. Is that in the end there's going to be one or two outcome that they're going to be divorced because they have a disagreement, or Maggie Sawyer going to get fridged, which is equally bad.
Which is equally bad. But here's
and the thing is like she already had the moment of breaking up with the girlfriend. She already had the Renee Montoya and all of that happened to her. So it's like okay, and the thing is like give it. Anytime two characters get married, now they're set. That story becomes so fundamentally set that it's so hard to. The only way to separate that is through divorce, which oftentimes doesn't get explored well in the superhero comics, or it's going to be one of the person get fridged, which is terrible.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that the thing that you said that I find so interesting is, should we celebrate characters that represent inclusion getting saddled with the same bad tropes?
No.
And I don't think so, but I think part of the goal of like real inclusion is that the characters they're not all perfect. They're not all whatever you want to call Mary Sue. Like they have flaws and that they make bad decisions and bad things happen to them. They don't have plot armor. And in a truly inclusive fictional environment, that would work from top to bottom. We'd have people of every gender, every color, every sexual orientation, all of those things. And some of them would be bad and some of them would be dumb and some of them would go through bad tropes. And I think that represents good representation on the page, real inclusion when they're at every level. But I think the tropes don't have to come along with that. And I think that that's why people celebrate these moments, because like it feels like a little win. It's like, well, we did get a lesbian character who's a female headlining hero who got to say marry me. That's huge. It's a little win. She got the marry me trope. And then you have to take a step back and go, okay, but that trope sucks. Like, right. Don't get too excited.
I understand that, but to me, the way I go back to it is that that's equal to saying that, okay, we got all the rights for women. Now men should also be paid less.
Right. Like don't get to the inclusivity point and then take away from everybody. Get to the inclusivity point and give everybody something better.
No, but the thing is like, you should not try to aspire to be negative. You should aspire to be positive. Because, the thing is the same thing goes like, like when the Black Panther came out. Oh my God. But then we also had all these black superhero. Yeah, but they were crap. I'm sorry, but they were crap. They were, and the thing is also the same goes with like, all these other black actor who won Oscar for playing slaves and drug addict. How is that? That's not progress,
Right. That's not inclusivity.
That's and the same with this, like, oh my God, she get to see marry me. Oh, whatever. Like, and the thing is like, I don't know what happens in the end because I'm not going to read all the other crap other than last two trades that's supposed to be crap. I don't even know the writer's name. But the thing is like, I'm like, did they actually get married? No, they didn't.
No, they didn't. Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit in terms of the next. So let me introduce this last page so we can move to our last trade of this. So on the last page, we see Alice is still alive and she is with Bones.
Dun, dun, dun,
Dum, bum,
dun.
bum, at the DEO. And that's how
Right.
we transition to the volume 4, This Blood Is Thick.